Hello class 7th, I am Ashok, your English teacher, present here with part 1 video of the chapter Chandni from the book An Alien Hand. So let's start the discussion with the title of the chapter Chandni. Chandni is a Hindi word which means moonlight. Here in the story, Chandni is the name of a young god brought by Abu Khan as a companion pet. Now see what happens in the story. These are the outlines of the story. Abu Khan kept goats as pets. He loved his goats, but they left him one by one. He bought a young pretty goat and called her Chandni. So once upon a time, there lived an old man in Almora. He was popularly known as Abu Khan. He lived all alone except for a few goats which he always kept as pets. He gave his gods funny names such as Kalua, Mungia, or Guzri. He would take them out for grazing during the day and talk to them as one talks to one's own children. At night, he would bring them back to his little hut and put a string round the neck of each goat. So, in this part of the text, we read that once there was an old man who lived in Almora district of Uttarakhand, state of India. He was popularly known as Abu Khan. He lived alone. He had just some goats which he kept as pets. He used to give funny names to his goats like Kalua, Mungia, or Guzri. He used to take these goats out for grazing during the daytime and talks to them as one talks to one's own children. At night, he would bring those goats back to the little hut and put a string in their necks to tie them. Now, see what is there in the next part. Poor Abu Khan was a little unlucky in the matter of his goats. Very often at night, one of the goats would pull and pull at the string till it broke loose and then would disappear in the hills beyond. Gods in hilly regions hate being tied to trees or poles. They love their freedom. Abu Khan's gods were of the West Hill breed. They too loved their freedom. So, whenever they got the chance, they would run away only to get killed by an old wolf who lived in the hills. So, in this part of the text, we read that in spite of the love and affection Abu Khan showered on the gods, he was a little unlucky in the matter of his gods. And very often at night, one of the gods would make herself free after pulling and making the string loose, and then would disappear in the hills, which were there at quite distance from the hut of Abu Khan. This is natural phenomenon that gods in hilly regions hate to be tied to trees or poles. They are lover of their freedom. Abu Khan's goats were also of the same kind, West Hill breed. They too were the freedom lover, so whenever they got chance, they would run away to the hills, and unfortunately, they used to become the victim of an old wolf who lived there in the hills. Whenever one of the goats disappeared, Abu Khan was very sad. He did not understand why even the juiciest grass and grains that he gave them and all the love that he showered on them would not stop these unfortunate gods from running straight into the jaws of death. Are these gods mad, he wondered, or was it their love for freedom? But freedom meant struggle, hardship, even death. Abu Khan couldn't solve the mystery. So, in this part of the text, we read that whenever one of Abu Khan's gods disappeared, he used to become very sad. He was unable to understand the fact that why his gods were disappearing one by one. He used to give them juiciest grass and grains, and above all, he showered on them love and affection. And in spite of this love and affection, they used to go into the hills and only get killed there by old wolves. So, in this way, they used to go straight into the jaws of death. And Abu Khan was very worried about this, and he thought that whether it was the love for freedom or their madness which made them to go there in the hills, But freedom is a kind of struggle, hardship, even sometimes death. To keep one's freedom, one has to struggle and face hardships, even sometimes has to face death too. So Abu Khan could not solve the mystery of disappearing his gods. Now see what is there in the next part. One day, when all his gods had left him, Abu Khan said to himself, "No more gods in my house ever again. I may yet live for a few more years, but I will live without gods." However, the poor old man was terribly lonely. He simply couldn't do without his pets. Very soon he bought a young goat. He thought, a young goat will stay with me much longer. She will soon begin to love me as well as the food I will give her every day. She will never want to go to the hills. And he laughed with joy. So, in this part of the text, we read that when all the gods left him, Abu Khan decided that he would not keep any god as pet and will live alone the remaining years of his life without gods. But he could not stay without God and felt terribly lonely. He then bought a young goat so that it could stay with him for a long time. He thought that his goat will never want to go there in the hills as he will provide her good food and love. Thinking so, he laughed with joy. Now, see what is there in the next part. The new goat was very pretty. She was white as snow and had two little horns on her little head and a pair of gleaming red eyes. She had a friendly temperament and would listen to Abu Khan's tales with a lot of interest and affection. Abu Khan called her Chandni, which means moonlight. He loved Chandni and would narrate to her stories of all his friends who were dead and gone. So, in this part of the text, we read that the new goat bought by Abu Khan was very beautiful. She was of white color like snow and had two little horns and a pair of brightening eyes. She had friendly behavior and or temperament, and she used to listen to Abu Khan's tales or stories with interest and affection. Abu Khan gave her the name Chandni, which means moonlight. And he used to narrate to her the stories of all his friends who were dead and gone. So, this was there in this part of the text. Now, see. Several years passed. Chandni was still there. Abu Khan believed that Chandni would never leave his compound for the free and fresh air of the hill beyond. Alas, he was mistaken again. So, in this way, many years passed, and Chandni was still there with Abu Khan. Abu Khan believed that Chandni would never leave his compound and will remain there with him, and she would never go there to get the free and fresh air of the hills. But it was the matter of sorrow that he was mistaken again. This time he was also not right in the matter of Chandni. Chandni was also the god of hill breed and was a lover of freedom. Now, see, this is comprehension check. These questions you will answer in your notebooks. This is a homework. See the next part. Like other gods, Chandni too missed the hills. She told Abu Khan she must have her freedom. The story of the dangerous wolf in the forest did not discourage Chandni. So these are the outlines of the story. Now see the story in detail in the next part. Every morning, Chandni watched the hilltops bathed in the sunlight. How beautiful those hills are, she thought. How refreshing the breeze that blows through them. And how lovely to run across those green fields. She ran towards the hills but had to stop with a jog. The rope round her neck wouldn't let her go any further. How she hated that rope. So, in this part of the text, we are told that Chandni had developed a habit to watch every morning the hilltops bathed in the sunlight and thinking about beauty of those hills. She was imagining that how beautiful were those hills and how refreshing was the breeze that blows through the hills and how lovely it was to run across those green fields in the hills. After thinking so, she would try to ran towards the hills, but the string around her neck used to stop her with a jerk or pull, and now she stared to the rope and started to hate this rope. So, this was there in this part of the text. Now, see the next part. She stopped eating the green grass Abu Khan brought for her. Now did she listen to his stories with interest and affection. She lost her appetite, grew very thin, and stared moodily at the hilltops bathed in sunlight. Abu Khan did not understand Chandni's anguish. At last, she decided to speak to him frankly. Dear Abu Khan, she said, let me go to the hills, please. If I stay on in your compound, I will die. Now, Abu Khan understood Chandni's problem, but it made him very unhappy. The earthen pot which contained Chandni's breakfast fell from his hands and broke into 1,000 pieces. So, in this part of the text, we are told that Chandni stopped to eat the green grass brought by Abu Khan for her. Now she did not listen Abu Khan's stories with interest. She lost her hunger and grew very thin. And in sad mood, she just used to gaze or stare at the hilltops bathed in sunlight. Abu Khan did not understand what had happened with the goat. He could not understand her pain and grief. Then finally, she decided to talk to Abu Khan frankly or without hesitation. She said, Abu Khan, to let her go to the hills as it was difficult for her to stay there in his compound uh, anymore. She added that if she would stay there, she would die. Ultimately, Abu Khan understood Chandni's problem and he became very unhappy after listening to Chandni's words. He was so sad that earthen pot containing Chandni's breakfast fell from his hands and broke into many pieces. Today we will read only this part. The next part will be discussed in the next video. As a homework, you will complete the first comprehension check and write the summary of the discussed part in your own words in your notebooks. That's all for today. Thank you. Have a nice day.